So I want to thank Mark Law for allowing me to come in and do this, because I think it's the most important thing, educating people on this. And we're going to talk about quite a few things today. We're going to learn about what to watch out for. We're also going to learn how these things get onto systems. We're also going to learn how the criminals actually work and whatever. And hopefully you'll be scared and amazed. But at the end, there's some good news. So just hang in there, all right? Obviously, my name is Bill Blum. We take care of your technology here. This is a younger version of myself here. The real problem is that human factor is the security's weakest link. This was said by Kevin Mitnick. He's a convicted cyber criminal. He spent probably a couple years in a federal penitentiary for some of the things he did. Now he actually has a mission of educating people. So we work with some of his training modules. And the goal of all of our policies, cybersecurity policies, are an acceptable balance between functionality, usability, and risk. And when we met with some of the IT security people from one of your biggest clients, this is what we discussed, that the only way to be totally secure is not to connect to anything, and obviously that's entirely impractical. So the size of the magnitude of the threat is incredible. If Hackers Inc. was a company, it'd be #1 on the Fortune 500 and 74 times the size of Walmart. That's what they steal from the world economy every year. And that's just an estimate. CBS said that in 2016, 51% of American adults had their personal information stolen. And 2017, we expect it to go up to about 2/3. So 2 out of 3 of the people that watch this presentation have already been hacked and had their information stolen. The average cost is about $3.8 million, and that's because the Sony hack cost several billion, and some of these ransomware attacks are as little as $300. And the United States leads in the most losses because obviously we have most assets here than anybody else. 90% of the breaches 2 years ago were caused by human error or carelessness, and that's an IBM statistic. So we're always going to have human error. We're going to have a healthcare worker who types in the wrong email address and suddenly somebody else at Gmail gets somebody's health record. That's an error. That's always going to happen with human beings. But carelessness is something that we can absolutely avoid by changing our habits and thinking more about it. The federal government has 3 agencies that we work with. The FBI is the primary agency for cybersecurity internally. And they have an InfraGard program we've been a member of for about 20 years. They used to send out newsletters every quarter, then every month, every week. Now they post updates to their website probably 3 or 4 times a day. And they also have raised their threshold. It used to be they would look into any cyber crime that was worth more than $5,000. Now they've upped that to $25,000, and the criminals know that, so they steal $23,000 worth of stuff, knowing that the feds are never going to come after them. The president, every president since Reagan, has had a cybersecurity initiative. And Reagan's an interesting example because he started it in this country. He went to Camp David one weekend and he watched a movie called War Games. He came back from that and he had his national security meeting on Wednesday. And he went into a detailed plot analysis of that movie. And everybody in the room was kind of shaking their heads and winking, saying, what has he lost it? He's talking about Hollywood movies here. Well, at the end of it, he said, listen, I'd like to know from the Joint Chiefs if this threat is real and can this actually happen? It was about a young hacker who hacked into the North American radar system. They said, we don't know, we'll find out. They came back 3 weeks later and they said, sir, not only can it happen, but the threat is much greater than we ever expected it could be. So that's when we started a cybersecurity initiative at the president's level. The Joint Chiefs of Staff every year report to Congress the biggest threats that face the nation. And the first time, a year and a half ago, they came back and said, it's the usual suspects, Iran, North Korea, nuclear threats and all that. But the biggest threat we face is in our cybersecurity, in our intelligence systems and in our information systems. We are most vulnerable there. And they're putting together 133 teams by next year to combat it. They're hiring people like you can't believe at the NSA and the CIA. So when we talk about cybersecurity, there's 5 very important concepts. Number 1 is backups, business continuity, disaster recovery. Here at Mark Law, they've invested in a very state-of-the-art system. As a matter of fact, we're talking to Microsoft now, the Microsoft Cloud people, about taking advantage of their cutting-edge technology so we can have almost instantaneous recovery in the cloud. But I encourage everybody to have a backup of your personal files at home. And a backup does not mean synchronizing to iCloud or synchronizing to OneDrive or Google Drive or any of that. Those are synchronization technologies whereby you can get multiple devices and sync them up to the cloud. The problem with those is that if they get your iTunes password, they can toast everything on your iTunes, your iCloud, everything. They have the key to the entire kingdom there. What you want to do is use something like Mozy, Carbonite. I use something called Crash Plan. It's about $50 a year. It's very inexpensive. Different username and password than anything else for your backups. This way, if they get into your systems, they get into your computer, they get into your phone, and they destroy anything there, and they destroy it at iDrive or iCloud or any of those places, you'll at least be able to get a backup because they won't have your password into that. So it's a very important concept. The other concept is no privacy on the internet. We'll talk a little bit about that. The Supreme Court ruled that back in the 70s, that if you're using a public network, back then it was a phone system, who you call, the length of that call is discoverable. And the content of the call needs a court order or warrant of some kind in order to look into the content of the call, so you have privacy around the content. But you have no privacy in terms of who you called. And recently, the Congress overwhelmingly gave your ISP the right, as Google has on, we'll talk about that, on your Android devices, to take just about anything they want off of there. So they can track and sell the information about you, about where you go, the kind of searches you do, the websites you visit. Your ISP can actually sell that information now, and it's totally legal. In England, Parliament overwhelmingly, nearly unanimously passed a law that said not only can the service providers keep that information and sell it, but they must keep it on file for 2 years and hand it over to the government whenever they want. Because they said the concept of privacy, bless you, the concept of privacy is secondary to the concept and their ability to be able to thwart terrorism through gathering this information. It was a huge uproar about 6 months ago when they did it, but then we didn't hear anything else after that. Information about you and the firm here is absolutely easily accessible. Very easy to find out anything about any of the people here on social media, throughout the internet, public records, and all that. So, I mean, my kids came home from junior high school 10 years ago and told me all the places I'd lived, the cars I'd driven, the first name of my first wife, which I'd never shared with them. And I said, how'd you get this? 14-year-old kids. They said, oh, we Googled you, Dad, and we just followed down all these paths. So it's incredible what you can find about yourself. And then obviously nothing is free as in life is free on the internet or anywhere. And that's a very important concept. We'll talk a little bit about that. And we have to always be vigilant. The bad guys only need to get lucky once. We need to get lucky all the time, just like they say about terrorism. So privacy, what does Apple, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, your internet service provider, and the government know about you? They know everything. Google can guess your IQ within 5 points if you use Google for search and you have a Gmail account especially. They can probably even get closer. Why? Because they know your browsing history, they know the words you use, they know your vocabulary, they know everything about you. They know when you get up in the morning and check your email, they know when you go to sleep at night and don't check your email, and they keep all that information. Google keeps all that, and we'll talk about that. And in terms of privacy, Google is now changing a lot of things on the privacy laws. And one of the things they've done is they're offering junior and senior high school students internships at the Googleplex. And they're actually paying for some of their college education. But it's not a random sample of high school students. 30 million school students have used Google Apps for free for all their schoolwork. And by doing so, the boards of education have handed over the rights to all of that to Google to use as they see fit. So they search it and they slice and dice it. And they find out who the smartest kids are, and those are the ones they're offering jobs to. There's a lawsuit now, from what I understand, from child's rights group but that's going to be tied up for a couple of years. They also drive around and they take pictures of your house, right? People, we've all seen that, right? Well, while they're doing that, they're also going on every single wide open Wi-Fi network in the neighborhood. And then once they get on the network, they actually crawl around the network. And once they crawl around the network, they find a machine they can get on. They'll take whatever they can off of the machine. The needle has changed there. If they had done that 15, 20 years ago, there'd be an uproar, but they've been doing it probably for 10 years now, and nobody really even cares. They did it in Germany, and they were thrown out of the country. And they also were thrown out of a couple other countries, I think New Zealand and so forth. But they're changing privacy laws and concepts with the technology. They're also posting on Google Books. You can read any book imaginable, any periodical. They're scanning tens of thousands of them every week. The Writers Guild sued them and actually lost in their first round because the judge said that because Google doesn't have any advertising on that site, the greater good of allowing this to be accessible by anybody anywhere beats the writer's needs to get copyright protection. So it's pretty interesting stuff. Now the difference between Microsoft, Apple, and Google, they all use the same colors, by the way, is that Microsoft is primarily a software company. We know that. We use their software. Yeah, they make devices. This laptop I have is a Microsoft device, the Xbox. But primarily, they make the best business software on the planet, and now they do cloud services. Apple is a hardware manufacturer. They make 200 to 300% margins on everything they make. You can't buy the Apple operating system on anything except an Apple device. They control it. They also control what goes on that device, and they found a way of every transaction on that device they can make money on. So they take 20% right off the top of everything that goes through the iTunes store. They grossed $27 billion last year, and they took 20% of that for themselves. So they're brilliant, but they're a hardware company. They don't make software. They don't give away their operating system. They don't care about that. They care about the margins they make on very innovative hardware. Google is an advertising agency, plain and simple. Every device, everything you use at Google, you give up your rights to them to do what they want with it. So Android devices are the most popular. 85% of the market in the world for smartphones is Android devices. We don't realize that here because Apple has a huge market share in the US, but you go worldwide, 85% are Android. And the reason for that is they're very inexpensive because the operating system is given away free to all of the hardware manufacturers. So, but by using a Google device, by using Google Mail, Gmail, you give up your rights to that data, and they take all that and they create a profile on each and every one of us. So for instance, if I Google Jaguars and Maria Googled Jaguars and Alice Googled Jaguars, if I was into sports, I'd get Jacksonville Jaguars. If she was into animal rights, Alice, she would get things about jaguars, endangered species stuff. If Maria was into cars, she'd get everything about Jaguar dealerships. So they keep an 18-point profile on each one of us, and they don't tell us why or how, but that's what they do. And we need to understand that. Nothing is free. What you give up for free technology, like I said with the Android, is that they have rights to that information. And criminals also want you to believe that they're going to give you something for free. So I encourage anybody that has a senior citizen they know that uses a device. My mother uses an iPad, and we keep close rein on what she does because they target senior citizens, these criminals, and they will tell them that if they send them $500, they're going to give them the $3 million they won in the Jamaican lottery. Well, there is no Jamaican lottery, and they fleece senior citizens out of millions and millions of dollars every year. My wife's stepfather, after he passed away, they found out that he had given these people probably several $1,000s, and he had stacks of real mail from other scam artists like that. So if you're also doing anything with any free music, free videos, I watched first-run movies on the internet, run as fast as you can, because those sites are usually they're always run by criminals of some kind. They're already stealing the content, so they're looking for you to give them access to your machine or your credit card or whatever. And even if you're paying 15 cents a song, that's not market rates. Market rates are what Amazon charges and iTunes charges. That's different than Spotify and some of these streaming services. They're all legitimate. But if you're buying music or getting videos at an unbelievable price, it probably is unbelievable. And it's probably taking your credit card information. So we also have to be vigilant always. We really need to stay on top of our game every time we click on something. And we'll talk about that because these guys have robotic computers out there hammering away at us 24/7. And it's not just us being paranoid. Andy Grove, co-founder and CEO of Intel, that was the name of his book, Only the Paranoid Survive. Got to understand that every company and everyone is under attack. I don't care how small they are or whatever. The old way of thinking was that there's two kinds of companies, those that know they're under attack and those that don't. Well, the new way of thinking is those that have been breached and those that will be breached. And last week, when the new FBI director sat in front of Congress and he talked about the cybersecurity threat around the world, he said we have to understand something. There are countries, he was talking about countries, we can talk about individuals and companies. So there's countries who have not waken up to the fact that they will be breached someday. And the ones that have been breached have waken up to that fact. We understand it, we know it. We need to educate the rest of the world and all of our people that this is the new normal, that you will be breached and you need to prepare for it. Lowell McAdams said that too on CNBC when he was asked about the Yahoo acquisition. And they said, why would you buy a company that's been breached? He says, we are all going to be breached at some point. Get used to it. So what do these guys do? They have self-morphing viruses in 2007. This was a major advancement for them. As soon as the virus is detected, this is 10 years ago. As soon as it's detected, it moves into a different place on the computer, changes shape, form, and everything. I saw this on my daughter's computer. I walked in her room. Hard drive is spinning crazily. And I'm saying, what's going on? We're not touching this. Look at it, found a virus, cleaned a virus, found a virus, cleaned a virus, found a virus, cleaned a virus. It chased that virus for about a day and a half until they figured out how to get rid of it. That was the end of the antivirus industry as we know it, and we're beginning to see new kinds of antivirus that we'll be deploying here. In 2009, a Russian gentleman created the Zeus virus, which gets in the middle of your browser, and it works on Apple's, Linux, whatever. When you type in your credentials for a banking site, even if you type in that little constantly changing secure ID password, it'll take those and send it to the hacker. And they have several minutes to be able to log in. This was in 2009. And it worked incredibly well. And no antivirus program could ever find this. In 2011, we saw a huge increase in that attack. Why? Because they used that, they sold the virus and made millions of dollars, and then they released it for free on the internet, and we saw a 300% increase in those attacks. That's what these guys do. 2013, they started attacking parts of the computer. So the RAM part of your computer is where information comes in. When you're working on a Word document, it sits in RAM. That's why if your computer shuts off, you lose it because RAM goes away. So what they did was, at Target, they got through a hole in the firewall opened up by the HVAC people to be able to monitor their systems remotely. So they exploited that hole in the firewall. They found out the password on every single point-of-sale system. These were XP systems, which was the same for every register at Target. They hacked that. They got in. They put this little thing that you wouldn't even recognize it as a virus. As soon as they swipe the credit card, it goes into RAM memory and then gets encrypted and goes out. Well, before it got encrypted, 18 million times they sent 18 million credit card numbers to the people, to the hackers in Eastern Europe. And by the way, writing that program, a 14-year-old can do it. They teach you how to do that in the first year computer science classes in college. My son learned how to do this. Not only on an IBM computer, on a Mac, on a Linux computer, it doesn't matter. You can write these programs. They'll teach you how on the internet, step by step. 2014, SSL is the technology we use to encrypt data so that nobody can see what's going on if it goes across the public internet. Well, they figured out how to hack into that. And then 2014 was a massive Sony hack. They were in that system for probably 6 months to a year and a half. And they had access to everything administratively, and undetected. They stole all of those emails, and then they finally released them along with time bombs to blow up all their email systems and everything. They were down for about a week at Sony. No email, nothing. Plus, they exposed all those private emails out on the internet. We know it was the North Koreans. We have them dead to rights. And the reason that they did it was they didn't like that movie that came out about the North Korean dictator. Very interesting. 2015, we had a massive attack at the Office of Personnel Management. That was done by the Chinese. We had them dead to rights on that one. They stole 23 million records of Americans, not the only Americans who work at the federal government, anybody who ever applied for a job. You fill out your date of birth, you fill out your social security number, you fill out all that stuff. 23 million Americans had their information stolen 2 years ago. Oh, and by the way, Sony has to let everybody know, and they have to get free credit reporting. That's why it costs them billions of dollars. Federal agencies are exempted from that regulation because what legislator would put a $2 billion price tag on a breach at a federal agency? So the Americans who had their information stolen didn't even know it. 2016, we found out about the 2015 hack of the Ukrainian power grid. Russians took responsibility for it, not the Russian government, but Russians took responsibility for it. They had been in their systems for 6 months. They shut down power to 750,000 Ukrainians 3 days before Christmas in 2015. They hacked into the power systems, they hacked into the computers that ran it, and one day they turned the lights off by wiping out all of those systems, deleting everything, all the routing, the switching, everything. It took them about a week and a half to get everybody back online. And they took responsibility for it, this Russian group, because they said, Ukraine needs to be under Russian control, and the people running Ukraine are a bunch of idiots, and this is so easy to hack into. And by the way, it was a sophisticated hack. We also want to show the world how good we are in Russia at hacking into these systems. Now, they could have done much more damage, but the Ukrainian power grid is very small fraction is computer controlled. The United States power grid, 99.9% computer controlled. And then last year and this year, we've seen the Podesta hack. That 14-year-old could have hacked Podesta's emails. They sent him an email in the middle of the night on a Saturday, and they looked like it came from Google and said, you have to change your Gmail password. We think you've been hacked. He sent it to his IT guy. His IT guy said, this is a legitimate email. Change your password. He followed the link. He ended up on a site in the province of New Zealand owned by a bunch of Ukrainians. As soon as he put in his current password and his new password twice, they grabbed it, they went directly to Google, they changed his password there for him, he had no idea, and for 10 days they stole all of his emails and sent them out to WikiLeaks and exposed them. 14-year-old could have done that hack. And by the way, they interviewed the IT guy and he said, yeah, I made a mistake. I meant to say this is not a legitimate email. He actually said that, yeah. The SWIFT hack, which is a SWIFT banking system, it's the way money is transferred around the world. So the Bank of Bangladesh had the largest bank heist ever, $75 million in about 45 minutes. They thought it was a good idea at the Bank of Bangladesh to buy second-hand routers. So they bought second-hand routers, which were already corrupted with firmware, with a backdoor. The criminals watched all the traffic going through to the Federal Reserve Bank for probably 3 or 4 months. They learned all of their codes. One morning, they started sweeping money out of Bank of Bangladesh's Federal Reserve account in New York into multiple accounts in the Philippines that immediately got flushed to Chinese banks. I wonder who did that hack. The only reason they stopped it was a clerk paid attention and said, this is kind of unusual. We don't see $75 million flowing from Bangladesh to the Philippines. He stopped it. Had he not stopped it, it could have been close to $1 billion lost.
There's going to be good news, right? Promise.
Yeah, there will be good news. Yeah. So why do these people do it? Same reason that the old bank robbers, when they were asked, why do you rob banks? Well, that's where the money is, obviously. And there's a lot of reasons why they do it. There's 5 distinct groups. Number 1 are insiders, and they're very dangerous, but it's limited what they can do. It's limited to the company they're working for. But these are very devious people, and we need to keep our eye out for them at all times. They've done incredible damage to many companies. We also have individuals and lone wolves. These people are also very dangerous, but it's very limited what they can do. They usually have a vendetta against a celebrity or a particular company. They're very smart, but just like a single terrorist, it's kind of contained what they can do. Hacktivists, now we're getting into where they have a global threat here. They have political, sociological reasons that they hack into systems. Estonia is a small country. They do everything on the internet, dog licenses, driver's licenses, all their voting's done there, all their banking is done there. It's a small country, they can do it. Well, they decided to pick up the graves of these Russian soldiers and move them to a memorial park outside of town. 3 Russians got together and thought this was a very bad idea, thought it was an affront to their memory. They organized 30,000 computers around the world and they shut down Estonia for a week. They convened all the greatest cybersecurity people on the planet to figure out how they did it and figure out who it was. They eventually found these 3 people and they put them in jail, but these people are very dangerous because they believe in a cause and they'll do whatever it takes to further their cause. Then you have the state-sponsored terrorists. These people have very deep pockets, and they're very, very dangerous. This is an actual FBI wanted poster. We know who these people are. We know what they've done. We know what they've stolen. A lot of stuff. We can't touch them. They're all in China. We can't prosecute them. And then we have these well-organized criminal networks around the world. This is like an eye chart, but it's really a graph of a real criminal network. The servers they use, the ISPs they use, the techniques they use, and there's thousands of them. So when somebody does that, we had a client that got hit by this Zeus virus that steals the banking information. There's one group that targets a company. Well, this company managed accounting for 75 locations, okay? They had a lot of money running through an office no larger than 2 or 3 of these conference rooms. They targeted them. They knew everything about them. They did all the social media research on the owners and whatever. They sold that information to another group who purchased from another group a virus that got on this person's computer. And they befriended the person on social media, sent this little virus. The antivirus will never find it. They also knew that they were banking in this 5-mile radius. Why would you drive more than 5 miles to the bank? So anytime they hit a banking site, one of these 5 banking sites within a 5-mile radius, it would steal the username and password. They didn't even do the hack. They just grabbed that stuff. They had thousands of subscribers who they sold that information to. And they got a call from their bank saying, are you trying to wire transfer $30,000? They said, no. Bank hung up in TD Bank and said, we'll call you back. They called them back within an hour and they said, we've frozen all of your accounts. Within 1 hour, we had 1,900 requests to move money out of your accounts around the world. So this is how these criminal networks operate. Everybody's got their own piece of the action, and they're spread out around the world, and it's very hard to catch them all. So who are the targets? Everyone is a target. 90% of all the attacks are against businesses with less than 1,000 employees, and 1/3 of all the breaches are against companies with less than 100 employees. Sound familiar? Well, that's because these companies are small, they don't pay attention to it, they don't have a budget, and retailers are attacked now more than the previous target, which was the financial institutions. And that's because, again, they work on very slim margins. You can imagine a grocery store works on 1% to 2% gross margin. They have very little money to throw at cybersecurity. And the amount of money that goes through those organizations these days electronically is incredible. So what do? They use viruses, spyware, malware. We foil, if you saw how many attempts in this company every day, every week, it's mind-boggling that we see that we throw out right at the front door. They don't even get in. And this stuff is designed to steal information, corrupt it, or sell it to somebody else. And there's multiple methods of infections. You can get it from an email. You can get a text message that has a virus in it. And some of the most devious ones are owned by state governments that buy this stuff from very smart cybersecurity firms as tools to target individuals they want to target. And then you could also get it from websites. So 90% of all the email that you get is spam that you don't even see. So imagine your inbox. Everybody's inbox is pretty full, right? Imagine having to sift through 50 emails for every one that's in there. That's how many we throw away at the front door. Don't even get near your inbox or to your quarantine spam filter. And it's real easy to do. You can create these emails. I can send an email right now, look like it came from Andrew, send it to Maria. She would never know the difference. Incredibly easy to spoof. And they send viruses in email attachments, viruses in text, and links to infected websites. This is the real dangerous one because you get a link in an email. It's almost impossible because it doesn't have a virus, it's just a link. Takes you to a website that's infected, and 1 in 8 web pages are infected. Google says that 10,000 a day come on infected. And what happens is you click on that link, it downloads a virus onto your computer. Your antivirus doesn't even recognize it as a virus. That's how ransomware works. That's exactly how it works. And it starts encrypting all your files. Well, the antivirus doesn't see it as a virus because for $100 today, you can go on the web and you can choose your virus, put in your credit card, and they'll take any virus you want, they'll morph it over and over again, they'll run it against 50 of the biggest antivirus engines until it comes up clean against all of them. And now you have your very own zero-day virus that no antivirus engine knows anything about. And then it starts encrypting the data. And that's what we do all day long, is we change files. And it's changing those files. So that's how ransomware works. You need to be incredibly suspicious. Never click on a link unless you're absolutely sure it's safe. I can tell you at least once a month, I'm about ready to click on a link and I'm like, whoa, something is not quite right here. And I stop, and I tell you, at least once a month that happens to me. And you can always mouse over a link to see what the real URL is, but that's less effective these days because they're squashing URLs down and making them really tiny so you couldn't even see where you're going at that point. You always have to look at the name right before the .com, .org, .net, and that's usually highlighted. You want to make sure you're going to bankofamerica.com rather than bankofamerica.hackers.com. And you can see that by looking at your browser. Last week, we're putting a tool on your network, I think we already did, that goes out and protects you from this because it keeps track of all these bad websites and doesn't even let you get to them. It's a new service from Cisco. But I have that on my laptop. I went to make a New Jersey tax payment, personal tax payment for this year, and I'm saying, well, let me do it online instead of putting a check in the mail like I usually do. So I go to njtaxation.com. Bam, it came up and said, no, this is not a secure site. This is a threat. I'm like, oh, I put .com instead of .org. Yeah, so be very careful where you're going on the internet. And if you're ever requested to change your password for a site in an email like Podesta was, don't click on the link, delete the email, and go directly to the site yourself by manually typing it in. Had he deleted that email from those hackers, went to the Google site, changed his Gmail password, they would have never gotten his password, they would have never gotten his emails. So never click on a link in an email.
That includes, like, you know how if you forgot your password and you're at a site and you click and it says, we'll send you a temporary link, and then you go into there.
Yeah, those are usually pretty legit because you're expecting that.
Right.
It's not an unsolicited
it's just
link.
Unsolicited.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Be very careful of the unsolicited, and also be very careful of the ones that look like they're coming from a trusted source. So, you know, if any of the partners here sends you an email and they don't usually send you an email, it's like, and the language isn't quite right, like, isn't it, is this the greatest? Like, I can't imagine any of them, you know.
Yeah, talking that way.
Yeah. Confirm the identity of anybody that sends you a link or an attachment. Just be very careful. So the economics of this spyware, malware, and viruses is pretty incredible. The individuals and crime gangs build them for their own use, like the Zeus virus we talked about. They sell them and then they give them away. But nation states build them for spying, gathering intelligence, and for stealing stuff. I saw General Michael Hayden. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But he said, we in the intelligence community, we don't make this stuff. We buy all these tools from wherever. And it's pretty interesting that venture capital funded companies from the US fund these companies, primarily in the Middle East. Israel is probably the smartest people on the planet when it comes to cybersecurity. They hire these companies and they build this stuff. And then they sell it to governments, nation states, whatever. And they use it to spy on their citizens, spy on other countries, and all kinds of things. Government agencies, US included, that's what they do. And they've got huge, big pockets for this. So General Michael Hayden, I saw him talk about 6 months ago about cybersecurity. He had about a 2-hour presentation. And the thing I liked was that his presentation and mine are 80% identical. So I took the other 20% of his and I incorporated it in here. And he said some interesting things. He said, spy versus spy, this has been going on forever. Like the big news story that, wow, Russia's been hacking the elections. Newsflash, they've been doing it forever, okay? We do it, we do the same thing, and we're the best at it with the best tools, and may that continue. Now, this isn't me talking, this is a guy who ran the NSA and CIA under 3 presidents.
Meaning we hack into other countries' elections?
Absolutely. Not elections.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a good point. We do it for fundamentally different reasons than our adversaries. We do it to protect ourselves. We do it to spread democracy and our values. They do it to spread their values around the world. And he said, you know, our values and their values are not aligned, but they do it for the same reason that we do it. They want to spread their message and their values. So Russia wants to spread it to spread the Russian government's message, and China does it basically because they want money. They could care less about their message. If fat, dumb, and happy over there, they want money, and they steal money more than anybody. North Korea, they do it because they didn't like a movie, you know. So, and he also said cyber warfare is a lot more difficult. We don't even know how to define it. We can protect against physical missiles. Going against cyber warfare is very, very tough. He also said that there's honorable hacks. He said the Chinese hack against the Office of Personnel Management, he said that was an honorable hack. They stole all that stuff fair and square. They didn't destroy anything, they stole it. And he said, shame on us for letting them do it. I blame us, he said. He said, because if I was in the NSA still, and my guys came in and said we could steal 23 million Chinese citizens' information that would give us information into how they're structured, I would say, wrap it up with a bow and put it on my desk. He said, we would have done the same thing. He said, the dangerous hacks are the ones from North Korea. Like he said, this guy didn't like a movie, so he destroyed American personal private property. He said that was the first time a nation state used cyber warfare to destroy private property. And he said, we should have gone after them with everything we had. Very interesting. The future is cybersecurity. So how do we protect against this stuff? As I said, zero-day threats, password hacking, stealth malware, that's a problem. And the firewalls we have in the antivirus are absolutely useless against these new threats. So the answer is something called SIEM, utilizing behavioral analytics, security, information, and event management. So in other words, we've seen this, many of us, the credit card companies have this. So I traveled to North Carolina at one time. I went out to a restaurant. I couldn't use my credit card until I called the bank because I had never been to North Carolina before using my credit card. And they just wanted to confirm that it was me. So they see our habits. Something goes a little outside of our habits, they shut it down. They want to know what's going on here. Those are very expensive systems, looking at huge amounts of data with huge amounts of processing power to be able to pick out that needle in the haystack that I was using my credit card out of the 23 million other Americans that use their credit card outside of my habit. But the technology for this is coming down to the small and medium marketplace over the next 5 to 10 years. So they'll know that, let's say Maria gets to work at whatever time in the morning, and she usually signs out at whatever time at night. They know her habits. They also know that other people could be logging in at any time of the day or night. So they create a profile, just like Google has a profile on all of us with big data and big processing power. We're going to be able to do that here and understand how you use your systems here. Let's say Andrew changes 5 files an hour. Somebody else here might be changing 50 files an hour, and that'll be a personal profile. So if suddenly Andrew starts changing 50 files an hour, bam, that's a red flag. Or if somebody who never logs in past midnight suddenly logs in at 3 o'clock in the morning and starts changing files, we'll get an alert and alarm immediately. But we're about 5 years out from that. Let's talk about social networking sites. I don't think we're all adults here. I mean, once it's on the internet, it never goes away. Don't be stupid. Be careful what you post. Tell everybody around you, anybody you know. This stuff is all discoverable very easily. I mean, it's common knowledge that, when you recruit people, first thing we look at is their social media sites and see what we can find out about them on the internet. Don't be posting that, I'm going on vacation for 3 weeks, okay? Because, like I said, criminal gangs sell that information to other criminals. Smartphone apps, be very careful with your smartphone apps. More than 50% of them take your personal information. Delete the ones you don't use today. Go through, if you don't use it, get rid of it. And understand that some of these are really, really bad. Make sure you wipe your phone before you get rid of it. Very simple to do. It's 2 or 3 steps. You want to wipe it? Yes, I want to wipe it. Are you sure you want to wipe it? Yes, are you absolutely sure you want to wipe it? And you wipe it. And that's what we do with all our phones. The location services is great stuff. I want to know where the nearest Starbucks is. I don't care if Starbucks knows I'm sitting on the corner of 23rd and 8th Avenue. I could care less, okay? But Waze, great app. I used it for about 6 months. Could find no way that thing would stop knowing my location when I wasn't using the app, even when I told it. So I got it off of my phone. It works so well because it works in the background when you don't want it to be working, because it pulls all of this big data together and presents it to you. It works phenomenal, but I'm a little creeped out by them knowing where I am all the time. And the fact that they could probably sell that to somebody, God knows. Not that I'm all that important, but I just didn't like it, okay? And it's very easy to turn on the microphone and camera anytime. It's like child's play. And viruses, malware, that's what they do. They turn on the microphone, they turn on the camera. And viruses and malware in smartphone apps are Google deleted 10,000 apps about 2 months ago from the Google store, Google Play Store, because they did a sweep of them and they found that 10,000 of them did things they don't want to do. Anybody use Uber here? I use Uber all the time, right? It's a great app. I guess not. Some people do.
Yeah,
no.
Yeah.
Well, I use it a lot because it works phenomenally well. Well, Uber's got a lot of legal issues if you've watched the news, all kinds of problems there. And Apple warned them about 3 weeks ago that if they don't stop doing what they're doing, they're going to throw them off of the iTunes store. You know what they were doing? Even if you check the box, I don't want you to know where I am when I'm not using the app, they continued to know where you were and track that. Not only that, but if you deleted the app from your phone, they still tracked where you were going. And they said, if you don't stop doing this immediately and send an update that wipes this stuff out, we're going to throw you off. Nobody will be able to use an iPhone with Uber. And you can imagine what that would do to them. So there's a big debate legally, like, do they have too much power over a single provider, in the marketplace? Is that a monopoly? And so there's all these legal issues around this stuff that's pretty interesting, especially to somebody like you. Wireless networks, be very careful. If it doesn't require a password, it's an open network and it's less secure. So, and if you go on an open network, and there's more of these, make sure that it's got an HTTPS, stands for secure, and then it's encrypted end to end. And most websites now are HTTPS. If you go to Google, it immediately switches it to secured and encrypts it. That's why you see more and more open networks. That's why Starbucks has open networks now. But if you're at home, use password. Don't give it out to anybody except your friends, and use that encryption, because you don't want anybody else traversing your internet. And if possible, I always tether it to my phone, or I have a personal MiFi device. USB thumb drives, flash drives, be very, very careful about these. They're powerful tools for a hacker. It's easy to embed a virus on one of them, You plug it in, and the computer's got a virus. That's how we hacked into the Israelis hacked into the Iranian nuclear program several years ago, put them back 2 to 3 years. Put a USB key, operative of ours, put a USB key in a computer there, crawled a network, found the Siemens controller that controlled the centrifuges, spun them up in the middle of the night beyond their usable range, and they came in the morning with all their centrifuges destroyed and 60% of their enriched uranium was gone. And they had to explain how we did that because, again, usernames and passwords. The Iranians didn't change the default username and password to the Microsoft database that ran the Siemens controller. And they had to alert the rest of the world that you better change the password because now they found out that that virus, the Stuxnet virus, was now in the wild, and our enemies could use that on us. So very interesting how all this works. Always use brand names. Never use a USB key you found. Don't even use ones you get at trade shows. I throw those all out. I get a shrink-wrapped one from SanDisk or wherever because they drop these things in hackers drop them in restaurants and bars and corporate meeting rooms and whatever. Always be sure your antivirus at home is up to date and scans anything that's plugged in. And many companies now don't even have USB drives or DVD drives. Financial community, you get a notebook from PwC, it doesn't even have a DVD drive or USB drive anymore. You can't get anything in and out of that thing for that reason. This is the most important point, and I'm going to try and wrap up in the next few minutes. Social engineering. This is something you need to be very, very aware of. People convincing you to do something you shouldn't do. It's the latest and most effective tool, okay? You get a phone call. I'm from the help desk. I'm from Microsoft. I'm from the IRS. I'm from your bank. I need to get on your computer, yada, yada, yada. It works. I can't tell you how many times this works. I get the calls. Forget it. Somebody calls from Microsoft, conference me in because I can't even get them on the phone. And we're a silver partner with them. So, and the IRS won't call you ever, and certainly your bank will never call you. It's hard to get them on the phone as well. And this is how Edward Snowden did it. He was a trusted employee at the NSA for 6 years. He was a contractor, originally from Dell and then from another defense contractor. And he knew a lot of people with high-level clearance, and they knew him, and they trusted him. He probably worked on their kids' computers. He was just a help desk guy. He had no security clearance whatsoever, Snowden. He walked up to 3 high-level security people there and said, I see something's wrong with your computer, but I don't want to violate protocol. I don't want to log into it. You log in with your username and password, I'll get on and I'll fix the problem. They're like, okay. So they logged in, they let him on. He put a keylogger on their systems. And the next time, and he logged out, and then they logged back in. And as soon as they logged back in, he had their username and password on his phone. Within hours, using their username and passwords, he stole all of that information and was gone in a heartbeat to that bastion of freedom, goodwill, and privacy, the Soviet Union, and where he remains to this day. And that's how he did it. And once they found out, they told those 3 people, either you leave or you'll be fired within 24 hours. All 3 of them put in their retirement within hours. So we lost 3 high-level, good national security people because they trusted somebody that they should not have trusted, and they violated protocol. And by the way, you won't see that in the Oliver Stone movie, okay? Beware of the wire transfers. Anybody that do wire transfers, they'll register a domain name, 1 character different. They'll send an email. It looks like it came from a principal of the company to a financial person who does wire transfers, and they'll figure out who that is. Pretty simple. And they'll use the language of the company and the language of the executive. They do it all the time. And the employee will actually reply, and they're now talking to a hacker somewhere, thinking they're talking to their boss. We had a client came this close to sending the password to a $12,000 wire transfer. And before she did, she said, maybe I should call the boss and make sure this is legit. Sure enough, it was not legit. He had a long domain name. They changed 1 character in it, registered the name, and they were traversing back and forth. They were conversing back and forth. Works. Can't tell you how many times. So what can we do? We can lock the doors, Okay, you have a receptionist at the front door, somewhat of a gatekeeper there, and that's good. But it's impossible to do in many, many organizations, healthcare facilities, hospitals. Why are hospitals target? They're the most porous environment you can imagine. You can walk around a hospital without being detected for days. We've done it. We've done security sweeps of hospitals' wireless networks. We're trying to hack into the network, and we've had nurses offer us their desk right next to a patient screen. I mean, it's just amazing. You can walk into places, you can plug into their networks, open networks, you can plug a wireless access point in. It's crazy. They trusted us because we had suits on, but it's just very easy to do. So be careful. You see somebody wandering around, doesn't belong, ask them, can I help you? What's going on? Who are you here to see? You know? You can lock your computer whenever you leave it. Control-Alt-Delete lock. Log off of your computer every night. You can restart it if you want. It should be on, but you should be logged out of your computer. You'll be able to get into it remotely if it's on. Make sure it's on, but logged off, okay? This also allows all the security updates to go through and whatever. Don't leave your passwords written next to a computer. I'm amazed I have to say this, but picked up a new client about 6 months ago. The accounting lady had on her monitor post-it notes for ADP and TD Bank and all these other places right there for everybody to see. Be very careful with USB drives and flash drives. If you have a notebook computer, they are serious targets. If you have any real confidential data on there, that should be encrypted. You should never leave information on a laptop computer.
I will have you know, because of your last meeting, when I go to the airport now, when I was in England, I didn't plug into the USB. I actually paid the 12, whatever it was, to buy
a charger.
Buy the charger,
right.
Because I'm always like, Bill said, if you plug it in, they can steal your data. Literally,
exactly.
Whenever I'm in an airport now, I
never use those things.
Yeah. I always have the actual electrical adapter, whatever it is.
Yep, we'll talk about that. Absolutely. Yep. Change your password regularly. Password policies are huge. Minimum of 8 characters, no matter what it is. Keep unique passwords for everything you do. Don't give it to anybody, no matter what they say. And if you do give it to somebody, like us, if we need to get into your system for whatever reason, you can change it yourself immediately. Control-Alt-Delete, change password.
See, that's where I have an issue here, because we're trying to, it's been proposed that we gather everyone's, I'm not really comfortable with that. And how do you tell people, don't give it to anyone, but give it to me because I'm asking for it and I want to keep it on file?
No, yeah, we'll talk about that. That's a bad idea, very bad idea for a lot of reasons. And make your passwords different for every site. And if you're looking for a way to manage passwords, like I've got about 450 of them, I use something called LastPass. LastPass.
Last, like L-A-S-T?
L-A-S-T-P-A-S-S. And it came up number 1 about 3 months ago on a New York Times technology review of the best password managers. And even cybersecurity companies say a password manager is better than trying to figure out how to manage it yourself. It's going to be more secure. They're a little hard to get used to, and there's some wrinkles every once in a while, but they're incredibly secure. Never email a work product to a Gmail account, an OptOnline account, a Yahoo account. Just don't do that. If you're doing that, talk to us. There's a better way, more secure. Because once it goes to Gmail, they can see everything that's in the email and the attachment.
I need to know that, because what happens is that a lot of times I have to print documents outside the office, and it's like I'm going into a meeting and I don't know what else to do. So
talk to us. We have techniques here that we can help you with that. Metadata, we all know what metadata is here in the legal community. It needs to be stripped out, obviously. Most companies don't know that, but obviously you know that here about metadata.
Can we set something up maybe where we show our assistants at minimum and maybe any interested attorneys on how to scrub?
How to scrub the metadata.
People that know how to do it, and I think it should be more common.
I agree with
Absolutely.
I was
Put in a
surprised-
ticket for that, please.
I was surprised that everyone doesn't have it on their email.
Yeah.
Because I had new people
They should.
with me, and I had to have everyone put it in. That works. So
Put in a ticket for that and mention that we talked, that this has to get done. So here's the good news. A lot of bad news, obviously, and we're just under an hour now, but here's the good news. The bad guys are brutally pragmatic and they're lazy to some degree, okay? They like easy, soft targets, and there are plenty of them. It's like any, physical burglar. They walk around and they see if there's a door open in the neighborhood. If you don't lock your doors, they're in your house. They're not busting through the window, and they're certainly not busting through a window where there's a barking dog on the other side and an NRA sticker in the window. They're not going through that window, okay? So just like the physical burglars, they're looking for soft, easy targets, okay? Be a hard target. Do the things that we're talking about here. Change your passwords regularly. Make them strong. Don't go to sites you shouldn't go to. Be careful about what you click on. And I'll tell you, you do all those things, and you have now elevated your safety and security. This is an eye chart as well. I sent this to Andrew, and he'll distribute it to everybody. This is everything we talked about. Okay, keeping your antivirus up to date. If you're running XP at home, please buy a new computer, okay, because it's not secure. Back up your data. Back it up to one of those inexpensive, legitimate services like Carbonite, Mozy, CrashPlan. Use encryption on any of your personal stuff that you put on laptops, and try not to keep it on a laptop. Change your passwords, lock or log off your computer every day. Never email your work products to a personal account. Never use flash drives you found. Buy and use brand names only. Wipe your smartphone before you get rid of it. As Maria just said, never use a public USB charging station where you plug your phone directly into a port that you have no idea what's on the other side of that port, because they can get access to your phone very easily. Beware of phone scams. I'm from the help desk, the Microsoft, the IRS, your bank. Beware of those. Convert, and also market research firms. They say they're a market research firm. They start asking you all kinds of personal, confidential information. Always convert sensitive files to PDF before you send them. That's the easiest way to strip out metadata, is to just take an Excel spreadsheet, a Word document, whatever, convert it to PDF and send it. All the metadata goes away. The only thing that's left is the content. Only use secure portals when you're transmitting personal information. Make sure you're on an HTTPS site. If you're putting in banking information, credit card information, it should always be HTTPS. Never use these free music and video sharing sites. Hackers all over the world run those. Protect your wireless networks with passwords. Never open a link or an attachment unless you're absolutely sure it's safe. Report anything that's suspicious to us. Do not click on it. Check your bank accounts daily and your credit cards at least monthly, because if you let it go, they could do incredible amounts of damage. And if personally, we're only responsible up to a certain amount of money for a breach, but businesses are responsible for everything if the breach is not reported within 24 hours. So in that acceptance of the bank's agreement to open a commercial account, you say to them that I understand I'm responsible for anything that gets stolen out of my account if I don't report it within 24 hours. And companies have gone out of business because they didn't watch their bank accounts every single day. And there's a program called Trustee Report that'll help you with banking sites. It used to work really well. It's an IBM company now, but sometimes it doesn't work with certain websites. We have a little disclaimer there. And that leaves us with any questions that you have.